Many cool talents and gifts and abilities, but were we given those gifts and abilities just to serve ourselves, or is there another purpose? Maybe it's not all about you or me. And that's what we're going to talk about today on Bible Study Live. Hey, welcome to Bible Study Live with Matt. I'm Matt, and we're going to be reading something out of Matt today, out of Matthew anyway, but we're going to take a look at Romans first. Hey, can we just talk for a second about like gifts and things? Last night we were we were at midweek at our church, and where we have a little teaching. We break up into small groups and stuff, and have some really cool conversation. And the last question that we talked about together was like, what's one thing you could do to be a blessing to somebody this week? And oftentimes we think like some big ministry thing, like, oh, I can go help my neighbor build their shed, or I can go help this person move across country, or I can go, volunteer at the rescue mission. And those are all great things. But it doesn't always have to necessarily be a giant ministry project, right? God has given each of us natural talents and sometimes blessings like that we've been able to learn that can be used to help people. There's a book, a business book, by Russell Brunson called Expert Secrets. Well, I think he said it in both Expert Secrets and .com Secrets, but basically he said, listen, no matter where you're at on the journey of something in your business, um, he's like, he's like, think of your business like a book. And he said, you might only be on chapter one, but somebody else is just picking up the book. So you can reach back and help them. You can help them learn what you've learned, right? We can't help somebody learn something that we haven't learned yet, but we can pass along what we've learned, what we've gleaned. And I think of that like in a lot of different ways when it comes to serving one another and helping one another. And so today we're going to take a peek at a little bit from Romans chapter 15, and then a quick little jaunt over to Matthew chapter 16. And we're going to talk about like using these things to help one another. So let's jump over. All right. So, in the letter that Paul wrote to the church in Rome, we're picking up on what's earmarked as Romans chapter 15, and we're going to read verses 1 through 6 out of the message. Oh, by the way, as always, the goal of Bible Study Live is to create conversation without condemnation. You shouldn't. I would hope that when you watch this, that you don't leave going, "Oh, I feel so horrible about the way that I'm living." Uh, my job is not to condemn you or convict you, right? Like God's Holy Spirit convicts us. My job is to help cause us to ask ourselves some questions, that might help us grow and, be better representatives of Jesus. So that's part of what we're going to dig into today is how we can do that. So the whole idea is to create conversation without condemnation. And man, maybe some of us, when we go through this today, we might feel a little conviction like, maybe I could step up in this area. Who knows? We'll see. But let's read from Romans chapter 15. And again, this is the message. Whatever translation you're using is good, short of like the Jehovah's Witness and Mormons scriptures. They add some stuff that's doesn't really line up. So NLT, NIV, New King James, ESV, all good in the hood. So here we go. The message, Romans chapter 15, verses 1 through 6. Those of us who are strong and able in the faith need to step in and lend a hand to those who falter, and not just to do what's most convenient for us. Strength is for service, not status. Each one of us needs to look after the good of the people around us, asking ourselves, how can I help? That's exactly what Jesus did. He didn't make it easy for himself by avoiding people's troubles, but he waded right in and helped out. I took on the troubles of the troubled, is the way the scriptures put it. Even if it was written in the scriptures long ago, you can be sure it was written for us. God wants the combination of his steady, constant calling and warm personal counsel in scripture to come to characterize us. keeping us alert for whatever he will do next. May our dependably steady and warmly personal God develop maturity in you so that you get along with each other as well as Jesus got along with us all. Then will be acquired not only our voices, but our very lives singing in harmony in a stunning anthem to God the Father and our Master Jesus. Man, there's some beautiful writing in that letter that Paul wrote, but I want to break down a couple of these sections, okay? First, Paul starts right out saying those of us who are strong and able in the faith need to step in and lend a hand to those who falter and not just do what is most convenient for us. Something about that stands out to me right now, as I wrestle through the scriptures this morning, is that Paul didn't say, when we see someone faltering, he didn't go, hey, those of us whose faith is developed need to step in and criticize people who are new on the journey. He didn't say what we need to do is, find folks who maybe aren't yet really, they don't understand the scripture as well as us. And what we need to do is correct their broken heads and get these dummies on track. That's not at all what Paul said. The NIV actually puts it this way: we who are strong ought to bear with the failings of the weak. Did you see that? To bear with the failings, and not to please ourselves. So Eugene Peterson's paraphrase, the message, and I love this when he says, we need to step in and lend a hand to those who falter and not just do what's most convenient for us. A lot of times, I know for me personally in my spiritual journey, you know, there are moments where it's like, well, it's easy to talk to this person, right? It's easy to go into these conversations because we agree with each other, or, when we see an opportunity maybe to help, it's something in our community, and we go, yeah, I'm off that day, but I don't really want to do that. Like, meh, and, I'm sure other people will, and sometimes, man, sometimes being quote unquote weak in this or faltering doesn't mean that somebody's necessarily spiritually stumbling. It doesn't mean they're incapable, but it seems like Paul does a pretty good job in when you look at the whole thing in context of getting back to the heart of what Jesus taught us, which is what? Man, we don't exist to be selfish, right? Most important commandment: love God and love others as yourself. What does the as yourself mean? Mean? What does that mean? Love others as yourself. Well, when you look at other breakdowns, different translations, and things like that, basically at the core of it, what Jesus said is first, love God with everything you've got, but next, love the people around you as much as you love yourself. Well, what does that mean? Well, the word love that's used there is agape, which is an interesting choice because Jesus was likely speaking in Aramaic, because that would be the spoken language that was used back then. But when Jesus was having this conversation, he was having it with a Hebrew, um, you know, religion scholar. So he may have been speaking Hebrew, right? I tell you that to say this: Greek has multiple words for love. Aramaic only has one. Hebrew, not sure. Personally, I studied the Bible from the Hebrew perspective for a summer, but I do not recall how many words they have for love. But the Greek word that's chosen there is agape or agapao. And what it means is benevolence, kindness, right? So when we think about that, Jesus says, love God with everything you've got. And then the love others as yourself means be as kind and benevolent to somebody else as you are for yourself. Or what is the golden rule, right? Like do unto others as you want them to do unto you. Jesus basically was clear, well, not basically clearly, Jesus was seemingly saying, look, most important thing is give God all you got. And the second thing is, look, anything you want for you, anything that you think you deserve to, anything that you wish someone would do for you, be willing to do that for somebody else. And so as Paul says, step in and lend a hand to those who falter, who are struggling. Let's just say falter. Let's replace the word with struggling, right? Somebody who's struggling, they're having a rough go. They need a little help. He says, step in and help. Don't just do what's convenient for you. Why would Paul say that? Well, the point that in the paraphrase Eugene Peterson puts here seems to be that, and he's Eugene Peterson's pastor for I want to say 50 years or something. He's a great religious scholar. Um, the point he seems to be making is this: when he says help those, not just what's convenient for us, is like, hey, don't be selfish. It's not about you. It's not about you. Now, my wife and I were having this conversation this morning about the it's not about you, right? As Christians, we have a tendency to sometimes take the Bible and go, well, this is for me today in 2022 or whatever year when, if people are watching the replay years down the road. There is a danger with forgetting that in the scriptures, there's a particular person talking to a particular group of people. However, Paul makes a great point when he's referencing Jesus, and he says you could be sure that what was written long ago in the scriptures was written for us. Now, Paul is saying that what not many years after Jesus' death, right? It's not like it was centuries later. I mean, we're just talking a few years here. And so when we look at things in that context, we go, okay, when it says written for us, what does that mean? Well, it means when we look at the scriptures and the life experiences that people are having, and when we look at the words that Jesus said back then, his principles didn't change. What he said to his followers about how we should live for one another still applies to us today. That's what Paul is saying to the people in the letter. And that maybe should be our takeaway, right? Is what Jesus was teaching them then, if he were here now, he would be teaching us, which is, I want you to love people, to care for people, to be as kind to people as you are to yourself. Well, now we go, well, what does that look like? Well, Paul goes on to go, that's exactly what Jesus did. He didn't make it easy for himself. Well, okay, so are there ways? And now listen, I don't think Paul means like, now go look for the most uncomfortable, challenging deal and go help with that. Like, here's a great example. I see a friend of mine, Topher. He's a minister here locally, and one of the most loving and sweet human beings I know. I love Topher. He was gracious enough to play tennis with me as one of the first people, was the first person that I hung out with here when we moved to Sparta. The dude, like, he will do anything for everyone, and I love that about him. He and his wife Ashley and their kids, they're just amazing people. So Topher's been posting, he's teaching the boys, they're like putting suspension on his truck, and they were doing like brakes or something. Now, here's the deal, that looks like hard work. He could probably use a helping hand. I got a D minus in auto shop and had my auto shop teacher tell me, you better sell cars because God knows you suck at fixing them. So when I look at Topher and his boys working on something, I would happily help. I don't care about an inconvenience. But the reality is my helping in that situation would make it worse. It wouldn't be helpful. But different example, my neighbor Dane and his family are moving in, and well, they're moved in now. They're great people, but like when he and I were talking, I don't know, a week or so ago, he had his sauna equipment like in the back of his truck, and as we're talking, I'm just trying to help him unload the truck. Is that the most convenient thing? No, I could have stood there and we could have not unloaded his truck, right? But I kind of been a jerk move. Um, Paul, when he talks about this, he says, strength is for service, not status. So that's paraphrasing the message. And I love that because a lot of times we want to work hard to get to a certain level in life, but we forget that like we that's a blessing. Our ability to work hard, our ability to learn is all a blessing, and it's not meant for us to keep. We were having this conversation in small group last night about like different talents and giftings that God gives us, right? He gives each of us talents according to what we can do with them. And 23 years ago, my former owner of a former dealer group I worked for, Tom Cole, may he rest in peace. What a wonderfully humble and loving human he was. Just an amazing man. He invested a lot of money in all of us in the dealer group to go learn how to sell professionally. And I mean, he spent $500,000 to do that. Now, he didn't have to do that. Most of his competitors weren't doing that. And obviously, he saw a business benefit in it. Look, if I equip my people better, they're going to be able to sell more, make more for him, for the dealership, everything. And he was right, and it worked. But still, he could have said, look, if you want to succeed, you need to invest in yourself. And I do believe that that's a good principle. But Tom didn't say that. He invested the money. And then for everybody who became a manager, I got promoted into a leadership role, a Nissan sales manager. He spent another gigantic sum of money so I could learn how to lead other people well and help them grow. And then he said, hey, for all my managers, I want you guys to learn how to be professional sales trainers, like how to really teach and help people grow. Tom invested personally in me over $30,000 inside of 2 years. Now, I tell you that because I tell you I wasn't qualified and I didn't deserve that. I have one semester of college because I really struggled in school in everything but economics and art. So I have a semester of college doing prerequisites for an accounting degree that I never got because I hate accounting. I just went into it because I thought CPAs made good money. So I took like an English course and an accounting class that I went to for one day. Like it was a disaster. So I didn't deserve the investment that Mr. Cole made in me back then. And frankly, I wasn't the greatest person. I mean, I made a lot of bad choices in my life. Uh, I was still really immature, but Mr. Cole invested in me just like he did all of those folks who'd worked for him for years, who were more equipped and more qualified. So to me, I look at that as like that was a blessing from God because if you would have just looked, I didn't deserve that. There's no way. But I don't think it was just so I could be a sales trainer. Fast forward time years later, as I got involved in ministry stuff, those skills for speaking, teaching, and training translated very nicely to the pulpit, right? There are a lot of people that spend a lot of time in Bible school and they understand the scriptures, but they've never been taught how to communicate, how to speak, right? But the way I look at it is that it wasn't a gift given for me to keep to myself, to just use to make money. Like I also help people learn how to speak and help people learn how to teach and help people learn how to coach because God blessed me that way. And that's what Paul's saying to folks here is like, look, the strengths you've been given, they're for service, not status. They're not for building up your own personal empire, but for helping grow God's kingdom. Pastor Bobby said a couple weeks ago, he said, it was pretty awesome. And they were playing it when we were at jail ministry yesterday. Um, he was talking about uh, how do I word this properly? That that basically when God gives us this grace and these talents, right? Because that's what it is. It's a gift, right? It's a gift we don't deserve. God's grace. When He gives us these, uh, if we don't use the tools we've been given, then He'll take the tools and give them to somebody else, right? So if God has equipped me as a teacher and a speaker and a trainer, and I don't use those gifts, well, if I'm not exercising what God has given me, if I'm not putting it to use, why would He let that stay sharp in me? Why would He leave that talent in me, right? Because there's somebody else who will use it to grow the kingdom. So I love too that Paul said this is exactly what Jesus did, right? Because he said every one of us needs to look out for the good of the people around us, asking ourselves, how can I help? And he said that's exactly what Jesus did. He didn't make it easy for himself by avoiding people's troubles, but he waded right in to help out. What were the troubles? Man, fall, right? Sin enters the world, boom, 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 boom. And Jesus didn't go, oh man, Dad, we promised we wouldn't do a flood again, so let's just burn the whole thing to the ground and start over. No. He stepped in and said, let me go show them how to do this. Let me go get in the mud with them. Let me wade through the troubles with them and let me help them through. And I love this because everything that Paul wrote about in that letter really goes back to Matthew 16, verse 24 through 26. And so we're going to share that scripture and then we'll wrap it up today. Because if we're followers of Jesus, we have to realize it's not all about me. At least not all about me getting. Matthew chapter 16, verses 24 through 26 says this. Then Jesus went to work on his disciples, his followers, right? Those who say, I'm following you. I'm trying to learn from you. Anyone who intends to come with me has to let me lead. You're not in the driver's seat. I am. Don't run from suffering. Embrace it. Follow me and I'll show you how. Self help is no help at all. Self sacrifice is the way, my way, to finding yourself, your true self. What kind of deal is it to get everything you want but lose yourself? What could you ever trade your soul for? Now, you may have heard it in other translations. What is it? Uh, profit a man to gain the world but lose his soul. I think that's the way others translate it. I'm going to pull it up in the NIV just because. Uh, yeah, NIV says this. What good would it be for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? Basically, Jesus, this is the way the Message paraphrase it is a verse that you're probably more familiar with in hearing this. Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. Now, I've heard people talk about their sickness and illness saying, this is my cross to bear. That is completely out of context. It is not what the scriptures say. What was bearing the cross for Jesus? Carrying the weight of other people's sin, right? Carrying the weight of other people's, carrying the burden of other people's issues. That was the cross that Jesus bared. Jesus, when carrying that cross and being on that cross, was scorned, was ridiculed, was looked down upon, was called crazy, was sarcastically made fun of as being called the king of the Jews as they spat on him, right? The cross that he bared was the weight of others' suffering. That was the cross that he bared. So when he says, if you want to follow me, you've got to deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. So the first thing there saying deny yourself should let you know that this cross to bear isn't like this chronic illness that you have. That's not a cross to bear. That's sadly a result of an imperfect world now, right? When people were created, we were created in God's image. God is perfect. We were created to be in perfection. The fall brought everything to this world: disease, famine, illness, sickness. It sucked. But the Bible also gives us a promise that we can cast out sickness. We can cast out disease. In Jesus' name, we can be healed. Some of that happens supernaturally. Some of that happens through medical science. So for every broken thing that came into this world, God brings a solution. So I share that with you to say your cross to bear isn't your illness and your sickness. And we'll join you in prayer and agree with you in prayer for healing. Your cross to bear is the same cross that Jesus bared, the weight of others' burdens. That's why Jesus probably said, whoever wants to be my disciple must, he started with, deny themselves. Why? Because carrying other people's cross, carrying other people's burden, right? That causes us to deny ourselves. Because if we were self-focused, if it was all about me, I wouldn't help you. Man, I got to help me, right? But Jesus said, no, no, no. You got to deny yourself. He said, take up their cross and follow me. Now, for whoever wants to save their life, or soul, that could be translated to, will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will find it. So whoever wants to put themselves first, it's not going to end up first. But whoever's willing to set themselves aside for the sake of Jesus, we're going to find true life. My friends, here's the thing. You got talents and abilities. And you don't have to go jump into full-time ministry to use them. Have you been taught something in business? Well, who else could you help learn that? Have you been taught by your parents how to cook well? Well, who else could you help learn how to cook well? Have you have people over there like, oh man, I sure wish I could cook like you. Are you somebody who's been blessed with learning how to get physically healthy and in good physical fitness and now you're like a coach and a trainer? Do you have a friend who's struggling with that? You can use those gifts and talents to help them. Uh, are you somebody who's got a lot of experience in marketing and sales? Well, offer to help somebody who maybe doesn't have the resources to get the same equipping as you, right? Like God has blessed you with a unique set of talents. God has gifted you with a unique set of life experiences. And those weren't just for you to keep to yourself. You know, I just popped in my head, but I think about the story of David and Goliath, right? So here's David, who's going to be the next king, or this kid, uh, and there's this war going on with the Philistines, and David's door dashing the food over to his brothers on the battlefield, and he hears Goliath just trash talking his God. Now David has been he is master. He's been a shepherd boy, okay, but he said to protect the flock, using the flock euphemism, right? Jesus, shepherd, sheep. Okay, but David, earlier on in this beautiful story that God has woven together through the scriptures, through these inspired writings, David had to protect sheep, and what did he do? He masterfully learned the art of using a slingshot to keep away bears and lions. Right, like this is David. Right, it's not like slingshot like we have. Right, something that took phenomenally more talent and more practice and more skill. But David was given this ability. And David's whole time, he's honing the skill to protect these sheep. Little did he probably know that one day when he was working DoorDash, bringing food to his brothers in the battlefield, that he would see a bunch of people cowering because of a giant named Goliath who was disparaging his God. And David's like, are you guys really going to let him talk like this? And he's like, I'm not. I'm gonna go fight him. And what does King Saul do? Saul's like, well, then here, take my sword and my armor. And David's like, it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. Why doesn't it fit? Because that armor wasn't made for David. That wasn't what God equipped David with. That sword wasn't made for David. But what God had done is equip David with a different skill set, a different talents, because David's life experience had prepared him for this moment. So with nothing more than a few stones and his same sling that he used to keep predators away from the sheep, he took down the giant, the Philistine named Goliath. See, David's talents were used to protect a nation. It wasn't just for him. He didn't just use a slingshot to go hunting, to feed himself, to focus on himself. He used it to protect God's people. You, my friend, were given a set of skills. You've got a slingshot that God has probably given you to take down Goliath, right? But maybe somebody's Goliath is that they need help with some area that you're an expert in, or that you know a little bit more than they do. Maybe you know how to help somebody build the deck. I say that personally because I'm replacing deck boards and I suck at it. Maybe you know how to help with concrete stuff, and one of your neighbors is struggling to get a sidewalk. Whatever it is, are you using the talents and abilities God has given you? Are you picking up your cross to bear, right? Your burden. Are you picking up that is your cross to bear? Are you asking God, what is my cross to bear? Whose burdens can I carry? I know I don't do a very good job of doing that all the time. I don't. But that's what this hits me with today, is that Paul explains to the church in Rome that we've got to stop just talking about the love God's given us and start exempling that love with other people. And all of it, I think, does tie back to Jesus saying, if you want to follow me, you got to deny yourself. Doesn't mean you can't ever have anything that's good in your life. Those are also blessings from God, my friends. But denying ourselves doesn't mean, well, you can't have your nice car. You have to like walk to work so that you can buy someone else a car. I don't think that that's necessarily what it meant. Also, cars didn't exist then. But like, I don't see that being what Jesus is saying here. But denying yourself, it's like, ooh, I want this thing. Yeah, but this person needs this other thing. Can I deny my desire and shift it to go because I want to love you like Jesus, like he loved me, by denying what he probably wanted. Not probably, by denying what he wanted. And we know that Jesus denied himself when he went to that cross, and that he didn't want to experience that horror. Because when he was in the garden, he prayed to God and he said, if there's any other way, if there's any other way, please take this away from me. And then he said, but if this is the way, I'll follow it. My friends, look for somebody that you can be a blessing to this week. Take an inventory of the talents and the gifts God has given you and ask yourself, how can I use these to love someone else? How can I use these to be a blessing to someone else? Ask God specifically, who can I be a blessing to? God, you've given me these gifts. Who can I bless with what you've given me? If you ask, you might be surprised, but God will probably show you exactly who. You may be surprised by who the who is. But I promise if you ask and you're obedient to God when he answers, your life will be better for it. Hey, I heard a really cheesy joke yesterday on Joel Osteen's podcast, and I'm going to share it with you guys because I laughed way too hard at it. And that's how we're going to end Bible Study Live today, with a cheesy, bad Joel Osteen joke, because it was a good one. It was good because it was so cheesy. But basically, he shared this story. There was this pastor who was trying to raise money for a new auditorium. And he said, here's the thing, anybody who donates $1,000, they can pick the next three hymns. And an old lady got up in the back and said, Pastor, I'll do it. And he said, well, all right, thank you. He said, now, which three hymns do you want? And she looked in the audience and she pointed at three guys and said, I'll take him and him and him. That was so cheesy, but I just loved it. I loved it. Anyhow, thank you guys for tuning in to Bible Study Live. We have friends coming in from out of town, so tomorrow's Bible Study Live may be a little later because they're going to get in this afternoon, and I'm not going to make them wake up at 6 in the morning so that I can do this between 7 and 8. So tomorrow's may be a little bit later, but there will still be Bible Study Live tomorrow. Heck, I might even do it while I'm on a walk with the dogs just from my phone on Facebook. So if you're not following me on Facebook, well, that is just silly. So do it. Facebook.com/value-driven coach. But tomorrow we'll do it. Just be a little bit later. But thanks again for tuning in. Listen, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. If I could be praying for you in any way, please feel free to drop a message to me on your favorite social media platform, whatever you're watching this on. And excuse me, last but certainly not least, if you haven't gotten a copy of our new book, For This Reason, How to Live in Ephesians 5 Marriage, you might want to reconsider that. Text the word love to 1-833-981-0002, and it'll automatically respond back with a link to go, and you can download the Amazon Kindle version, or you can grab the paperback version. And I'm telling you, it was a life-changing experience writing this book with my wife, and I am confident it will be a blessing in your life if you read it. So thanks again for tuning in. Love you guys. Appreciate you. Now go out there and make your day, and hopefully someone else's amazing.